Hi and welcome to video 2 in this MLB Workbook series which deals with the Quick Start Guide. So this will take us all the way through to placing our first bets. Okay, the process can basically be described in three discrete groups. We're going to take a FanDuel data file of about 1400 players and we're going to download that data. Then we're going to filter it through a two-stage process to bring it down to about 200 or so players that we really want to choose from. And once we have those 200 favorite players, we're going to bring the Excel solver in and we are going to optimize our picks based on the maximum possible predicted FanDuel points or DraftKings fantasy points that can be gained given the relative salary caps for the number of players concerned. That's basically the three-stage process. So stage one, locating the data. If you go to the FanDuel data file and data site rather, and you pick the game you want to play, you'll see a link called Download Players List. This gives you a list in a CSV file format, which obviously is wonderful for Excel. It's comma separated values. Similarly, with DraftKings, they also have a link on every game, and that one's called Export to CSV. Do make sure though with DraftKings that your tab is on the all before you download, because you want all the players. Okay, so I've downloaded both the data files from FanDuel and DraftKings. Let's start importing. Okay, FanDuel always dates their file, which is helpful. What's happening now is we're processing a file of 1400 players and we are using import filters to chop that down to somewhere around 600. Discarded ones have no chance in your DFS lineup, and this makes the whole process from here on in much faster vis-a-vis filtering because we have less players. Okay, and the filter options are here. Wouldn't change these unless you have a burning reason to do so. Okay, let's just see what we've got now. Player data. This is all FanDuel data, which is why we have to load the FanDuel file first. We are now going to append the DK salary and the DK points, the DraftKings points and salary, from the DraftKings data file. So that is why it asks us first, have you already imported the FanDuel data file? Yes. So DK salaries. Got to be cautious here. DraftKings tends to name every single file every day DK salaries, so wouldn't be the first time I've put the wrong DK salaries file in the wrong game. So need to do a bit of archiving and renaming if you don't discard them immediately. So takes a little bit of time because we're squaring up. I'll leave that for you hardcore DraftKings players to look at later. Basically, we've got all the good players out. So if we look now, if we look at the player data, there we are. Okay, so now let's go to the first main filter, teams. First thing we do is we refresh this. We now are about to interrogate the data file to find out how many fixtures. So the data filing is telling us today's game, 24 teams, so 12 games, nice. Good for us mathematical optimizers, the more games the better. Right, so now let's just say I don't like playing the Chicago White Sox when they're away. So if I put a blank in there or deselect the cross, I'm basically saying do not use this team and their players. So let's say I take out the Chicago White Sox and the Colorado Rockies. Now, another very important thing in MLB is the weather. Don't want to bet on games where they'll either be rained out or performance will decline because of the inclement conditions. So this is a great, RotoGrinders is a great site for many things, not least of all weather. It's still 3 days to go to the event. It's the 27th today. I think this is the 29th, so no weather data at the moment. But what they do give you is on the day they give you the forecast, no weather threat, caution or warning, high chance of rain, and depending on your risk averse nature or not, you might decide to cut some teams because of the weather. This is, incidentally, means that's a covered stadium, I believe, so that will be impervious to the weather. Let's do this though. Although we don't know what the weather's going to be, let's pretend the Boston and Tampa game is going to be inclement weather to the extent that we don't want to bet on it. So that will filter out Boston and Tampa. Why did I do that? Well, if you let's just quickly look at the final filter run. Team filter and weather filter. If I'm sort of desperate to find the players here, I might want to say, okay, well, I got rid of 40 players because of weather. I can ease up on that a little bit, or maybe I have to ease up on the team because I've lost too many players. It's all a game of getting enough players to the optimizer to give you viable solutions. So okay, that's the team filter we've done. Now the other one that's really powerful, exclusions. The list here is for illustrative purposes. Don't make any quality judgments about these players. It's simply, you will, as the season progresses, build up your own list of people you never ever want to have in your lineups. If that's the case, they are XX players here. XX simply means that even when you clear the list, they stay. So if I, for example, didn't like Gabriel, he's got a single X. Maybe for today's play I do all my betting and then I just press afterwards clear, and only Gabriel goes, the rest stay. Okay, and this is a great function. Press exclude injured. Everybody that shows any kind of injury in the data file is now excluded. So that saves you betting on and of course if you hear otherwise, let's say you hear throughout the day that, well, this was a day-to-day decision but Danny Duffy came back in, you just do that and he's back in the game. So now miscellaneous filters, a lot of people like to dispose of the lower end of the batting order. If there's an X in there, these will be allowed through, but if you're 8th or 9th position, you won't be going through. If you're doing this incredibly early, or if you are trying to use this sheet without a subscription, which you can do, you can use it for free, sometimes it is necessary, if you find that nothing's coming through on the batting order because there's no data, because a lot of the data on batting order comes from our API, which is a premium feature. You don't see it working, it works in the background. Just hit that X there and it will allow more to come through. I wouldn't recommend it if you're betting real money, because it's only $22 a month or $21 a month for all the sports. So if you play for free, like I do sometimes on DraftKings, you don't need a subscription. Okay, that one is to a certain extent academic, because we have the probable pitchers filter set on the import. This is always handy. I noticed the FanDuel file we downloaded has last season's games played data in, which is good to start the season because we have nothing otherwise. But this is always good to separate the good players from the not so good. Minimum salary as well. So let's just run with the way the filters are set now. Once we set all these filters, we go to the solver. We're in the FanDuel mode. We run the internal filters now. Now this may appear slow if you've been using the NBA workbook, but it's processing a lot more. Okay, so good, we have an overflow. So basically what we've done is, if we look at this now, we're at the solver stage. We had a file with 1400 players in. The import filters took it down to 541. Now the internal filters have taken it down to 202. Now the reason this is a total at the bottom and this is an overflow is quite simply the Excel solver can handle up to 200 records, and believe me, that's more than enough to do this, because we don't normally have that many players. The fact that 202 make it through here means that 2 go into the solver overflow. Whatever goes into the overflow is not just an arbitrary group of players. What tends to happen with the 202 is they are sorted on the basis of FanDuel points divided by dollars of salary. So what you're basically getting is getting them sorted on that basis, and the most productive 200 are taken for the solver, and the overflow are the lowest performance players. So you're not losing anything. Consider yourself lucky though if you ever have a solver overflow. On a day where you have 6 teams or something, you're fighting against the weather filter and the team filter, and this is one reason to use the W and the T. If I was down to say only 60 players here and it was starting to look a bit thin on the disposition, what I would be doing now is be saying, okay, maybe I need to get some of these teams back. Did I really reject weathered teams too harshly? That's basically what that's for. Okay, so now we're down to 200 players. Whoops. Now we're going to run the solver. Okay, so what this basically says is that the most projected fan points we will get is 146 given this disposition of players for the salary cap of 35,000. So let's just take this and take it over to the notepad. So that's going to be, let's say, our first bet. Now realistically, because we've got so many players, we've got a vast richness of options today. I'm going to go back and I might say to myself, what did I have? Let's have a look. So the lowest paid here is about 2,300s. Let's to get a different one. Let's take it up to 2,500. Let's put that up to 20 games, and then we'll run the solver. So run the filters again now. Let's run the filters because we've changed the settings. So we did have a small overflow. Now we're down to 103. You see the minimum salary filter took out quite a few. Incidentally, let me just explain this one thing to you because it is a point of major confusion. You see the excluded players filter has caught 22 players there. Let's just go back to excluded. If you look here, my guess is without counting them, we've got 30 to 40 excluded players. So what happened here? What happened here is it only caught 22 of, let's say, the 35. The reason for that is the filters go on in the order shown here, first, second, third, etc. So an excluded player who is excluded for an injury is really got a high probability of not having a position in the batting order, of course. So the batting order filter takes out some of these. A lot of them are day to day, so we can't say that. We can't say that the batting order filter will necessarily take them all out. And likewise the team filter will take some out, and the weather filter. So bottom line here is don't be confused. If you think your filter is supposed to grab more and it doesn't do, then they could have been grabbed by the filters above them. So alright, now we're down to 103 players. That's a healthy number because we've discarded some of the weaker options. Or, you know, the corollary to that is if you're playing tournament and you want to win the big 100,000 prize, sometimes you've just got to let the machine have its head and you know, get as close to 200 as possible because you're looking for the outside chance. So let's just run this, and that is our best option at the moment, given the fact we've only got 100 or so players to go from. Alright, it's dropped somewhat, but it hasn't dropped an incredible amount. We're down to 143 from 147. It follows when you're doing mathematical optimization that the more options you give the solver, the better result you should get. But then maybe this lineup is constituted by players who've had more time, more games played, they've got higher salaries. We've certainly knocked out these cheaper players here. So we've got 2 bets already. Now let's just do another thing. Let's say that you have you are confident in your knowledge of the game, or you do good research, which can always separate you in the field of mathematical optimization, depending on your knowledge. Say you want to play, I don't know, what am I doing? Go up here, play a favourite. Let's say Salvador, and I don't know, just put a D in. Dalton Pompey, nice name. Okay, so let's say these are my 2 faves. Once again, deselecting will take them out, but those are, because they've got an X now, they are going to be in the game. So once again, sorry, wrong one, go to the solver, run the filters, and essentially favourites are included players. So now here we have a problem. When you play your favourites, we play 2 favourites, but the filter is only showing it's playing 1 favourite. What that essentially means is the favourites tool, the system makes the assumption that you know better, and what it's saying is, okay, of the 2 players you said were favourites, one of them has been caught by these filters. So if you have a different number on that line, it's always good to Pompey and Perez, it's always good to understand why the system. Okay, so that's quite easy. This is why. So the system rejected that one because he has a day-to-day on the wrist. I'm not going to change that now. Let's assume that. Let's assume I know better, and so yeah, this is the way that would work. I know that Dalton, I think, is a great guy, and I know his wrist's good, and he's going to play today based on the intelligence I have now. Oops, sorry, let's go to Solver. Let's run this again just to see if we found the only problem with Dalton. Okay, we still only have one. I'm going to guess that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, I'm going to guess that he falls foul of either the salary or the number of games played or his position in the lineup, depending on how we set the filters. But I'm going to say that Dalton's a great guy and I'm going with him. So, yeah, look, see, he's 2000, so we set the filter higher than that. So that's why he would have been rejected. But anyway, this is, we overrode the system, and that's our bet based on our two favourites. Of course, let's say, I mean, I just guessed those names out of thin air by putting a lemon. But if you had solid favourites, even though this shows less, of course, once you override the machine with your favourites, you're assuming you know better than the average performance suggests. So you wouldn't worry that this is lower. This would be your bet, as it were. Okay, so we've got 3 different bets. 2 of them on the 35,000 limit. This one a little shy, but it's our best one. It's predicted to be our best one. So now I have 2 choices. I either go to FanDuel and I type in this, which is easy to do if you've got one, or we build an upload file that allows you to upload all your data, all your lineups, your 3 lineups, to the site. So to do that, we just press that button, and the lineups file has been created in the same directory as your downloads. So FanDuel MLB lineups is there. So then you just follow the instructions to upload to your game, and it's done. So alright, let me just clear the contents of that. Now let's just quickly do some DraftKings. Okay, all the filters. Well, the only thing about DraftKings, am I right in saying they have slightly lower salaries? They do in NBA. Anyway, I'll switch that. Well, let's just run the filters anyway. Let's see what we get. I'll tell you what, because it's somewhat restrictive, let's just take out my favourites. I'm sure they're not that fave. And then let's run the filters. So we're now in the DraftKings mode. Notice we've got no utility now. We've got a different 10 players and 50,000 cap. So that's how that comes out. We've got 103. So if I run the solver, that is I've actually started with the most restrictive one, so let's do this. Let's put that one in. Let's just go do another bet here. Right, exclusions stay the same. Let's let it rip here. We'll take everybody. We're not worried about the games, and put this to an insignificant number. Come back to the solver, run the filters again. This is what I'd do if it was like an out-and-out tournament play, and I really needed a punt. Okay, I've got 269, so I got a lot there. A lot of players to choose from, and so this is my best prediction, as it were, although I'm using, you could say, lower quality players if you pay less for them, I guess. So the lowest paid player here is 2,900, but you never know. The reason he came up was because he has good averages on his past games. Of course, we don't know whether he's paid one past game or two because we took all the filters off. So anyway, I've got two predictions now for DraftKings. Now, DraftKings is slightly different on its upload your lineups. First of all, you could type these in quite happily, but if you had 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 lineups, you need to build the file. The difference with DraftKings is the original data file we downloaded for FanDuel had all the information we needed to upload our lineups. The DraftKings file is not that way. You have to download the DraftKings template. I've already done that. You'll see it's self-explanatory when you get to the lineup section. So I've named this, once again, I think it's called DK Salaries. You've got to be very careful here. I've changed the name on that to the upload template. So I press that. Now what's happening is we're extracting all the player IDs from that template. Then we're reformulating the file to produce our DraftKings lineups file. So, okay, now once again we simply go to the site with our, and let's just open this to give you an idea of what it looks like. It's a CSV file, and we had 2 games, and those are the codes for the players. So essentially that is that. So let's have a look. Just to recap, we've done FanDuel, we've done DraftKings, we've done teams, player favorites, exclusions, solver, filters, settings. Let's do settings in a minute. By the way, this is perhaps the most powerful tool in the whole package here. It's only available for FanDuel, and it's only available for premium users, those who have a subscription. I'm not going to explain it now. This needs a whole new video to explain this. But basically it's to do with the better predictions you have, the more chance you have of winning. If you want to get an idea, the NBA videos cover this quite extensively. In fact, you could probably operate this from looking at those videos, but we'll get back to that later. Suffice it to say that up to this point, every lineup we've produced is dealing with the average fantasy points scored given in the FanDuel and DraftKings data files. No other external source of information has been used. Now, settings. Name equivalents, that's dealt with on the imports. This little routine has a few problems because it basically prints out every name that can't be found. So Steven Strasburg's in the DraftKings file, but not in the FanDuel. The reason he's in there is that I don't think he's playing. So DraftKings and FanDuel have some anomalies. This used to work well last season. Doesn't work as well now. But watch out for ones that have periods and things in. Maybe FanDuel describes junior like that. It could be a simple thing. Having said all that, I don't think you ever lose a quality player without just accepting what comes across. You saw ourselves, we still had a lot of players to choose from, and if a player comes through, we've got his data. Here's another thing. We talked about batting order. When we said if you have a free account, you might not have enough batting order data, so you can override it with the null selector. Here, what this does is, if you downloaded your data files 4 or 5 hours ago, in the morning say, and you just want to update any changes to the batting order, then that's what this is doing. If you didn't have an account, it would just tell you sorry, but this is just updated 339 players, their batting order. Hopefully there's nothing in here. If there is, drop us an email, would be helpful. If you are a hardcore Excel data analyst and you know what GRG, nonlinear and evolutionary are, then you might want to play with that. I strongly recommend, if you don't, you leave it on simplex. We talked about clearing favorites and things like this. This is the default setting. Although we save the file, I quite often use the same file on a day-to-day basis, day after day. I just press the clear the data button. There is a chat client, and what you will see coming over, I think, a few weeks into this season, is more to do with those people who have shared their predictions. That comes in the estimator. And you'll be informed of how many have been received and when the ExcelDFS predictions or projections for the day are going to be promulgated. Don't worry about if you're the strong silent type who doesn't like the chat, just set that to 0 and you will never hear anything. Once again, this is for your predictions based on the estimator, which isn't covered in this video. So I think that is about that. So good luck with the forthcoming season. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and thank you very much for making it to the end.